Why was the body of Moses never found? This question has baffled scholars for centuries. The mystery behind Moses' story goes beyond what was revealed in the Bible. There are secrets and truths that remain hidden to this day. In this video, we will explore the narrative of Moses and all the mysteries surrounding this intriguing and miraculous figure. Moses is one of the most notable characters in the entire Bible, and perhaps in all of human history. His actions and words left an indelible mark on history in a profoundly positive way. Chosen by God to liberate the Hebrew people from slavery in Egypt, lead them to the promised land of Canaan, and teach them the divine law, Moses played a crucial role. His story is meticulously recorded in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, with a special focus on Exodus. This second book of Moses covers his birth, his prophetic calling, and the liberation of the children of Israel from Egypt. Exodus narrates an incredible saga, the greatest escape in history, in which more than 2 million slaves fled from one of the world's most fortified nations. This narrative is filled with miracles, including the most renowned in the sacred book. Leading this historic moment was Moses, a man who witnessed more miracles than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob combined. Besides the miracles that occurred when God intervened on behalf of his people, some of these events might seem magical, like the transformation of Moses' staff into a serpent. However, most of these events were clearly manifestations of divine power over creation for the benefit of his people. Moses' journey is full of such examples. Let's delve into the entire journey of Moses until his death. Moses was born during a challenging period for his people, the Israelites, who had lived in Egypt for centuries. Initially settled there during the reign of Joseph, an ancestor of Moses who had been governor of Egypt, the Israelites went from a privileged life to slavery under the rule of the Egyptian pharaohs. To address this challenge, the pharaoh ordered the massacre of all Israelite boys, fearing the rapid growth of their population. Moses' family was determined to save him from death. Initially, they hid him, but soon realized the need for a different plan. Moses was hidden for 3 months, and when they could no longer keep him secret, his mother placed him in a papyrus basket and hid him among the reeds along the Nile River. While his sister watched from a distance, the child was found by Pharaoh Ramesses I's daughter, who was bathing in the river. The child's sister offered to find a nurse for him, and her own mother was chosen to nurse him. After he grew, the boy was returned to Pharaoh's daughter, who named him Moses, and raised him as a noble in a prosperous environment. Thanks to this dramatic situation, the son of an Israelite slave was raised as a prince in Egypt. Despite his status and luxurious lifestyle, Moses always maintained a connection to his roots and sympathized with his enslaved compatriots. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive the next stories and hidden secrets of the Bible. So time passed, Moses became an adult, and one day witnessed an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew slave mercilessly. Indignant at this cruelty, Moses took matters into his own hands and, thinking no one was watching, killed the Egyptian and buried the body in the sand to hide the evidence. The next day, while Moses was out again, he saw 2 Hebrew slaves fighting each other. When he tried to intervene and separate them, one of them turned to Moses and asked if he intended to kill him as he had done with the Egyptian. Moses immediately realized that the news of his hasty actions the previous day had spread and feared for his life. It didn't take long for the Pharaoh to seek revenge against Moses for the murder of the Egyptian. Moses fled to the desert, becoming a fugitive from justice. Thus Moses lived in the desert in the land of Midian. After settling in Midian, Moses encountered the daughters of the local priest who were drawing water for their father's flocks. When they were driven away by local shepherds, Moses intervened, driving the shepherds away and watering the women's flocks. Upon learning of his heroism, their father invited Moses for a meal and rewarded him with the hand of one of his daughters, Zipporah, in marriage. Moses reinvented himself as a shepherd, married Zipporah, started a family, and lived happily for many years. One day, while tending his sheep, Moses noticed a burning bush that was not consumed by the fire. God spoke through it. instructing Moses to leave his peaceful life in the desert, return to Egypt, and free the Israelites from slavery. The Lord revealed that he had seen the oppression of his people in Egypt, heard their cries before their taskmasters, and understood their suffering. In response, he decided to deliver them from the hands of the Egyptians, leading them to a fertile land flowing with milk and honey, the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. At 80 years old, Moses confronted Pharaoh, who refused to free the Israelites. In response to Pharaoh's obstinance, Moses unleashed 10 plagues upon Egypt. The Nile River turned to blood. There was an invasion of frogs, a plague of lice and flies, the death of livestock, the emergence of boils, a hailstorm, a locust invasion, darkness, and finally, the death of all the firstborn in Egypt. Only after these events did Pharaoh agree to free the Hebrews. As Moses led his people to the Promised Land, Pharaoh changed his mind and ordered his troops to pursue them. However, Moses parted the waters of the Red Sea with his staff. Once the Hebrews crossed, the sea closed, swallowing Pharaoh's forces. Upon reaching the foot of Mount Sinai, Moses ascended to the top and received the 2 tablets with the 10 commandments, along with a series of laws that began to govern human relationships. For 40 years, they wandered in the desert until the entire generation of slaves died, allowing only those born in freedom to enter the Promised Land. The Bible meticulously details the odyssey of the Hebrews and the events that shaped humanity for centuries. When Moses ascended from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho, the Lord showed him all the land and said, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it." Deuteronomy 34:4. Moses faced many trials in his leadership in the desert. The Israelites were an undisciplined and ungrateful group, frequently complaining despite the repeated evidence of God's care for their needs. They needed clear and effective instructions. After a military victory over the Amalekites, they camped at the foot of Mount Sinai, where God gave Moses the 10 commandments, written with his own finger on 2 stone tablets. While Moses was on the mountain, the Israelites made a golden calf to worship. Returning to the camp and seeing their idolatrous behavior, Moses was furious and shattered the stone tablets with the 10 commandments. Moses ascended the mountain again to plead with God to forgive the Israelites. Following divine instructions, Moses had to carve new tablets with the 10 commandments. He remained on the mountain for 40 days, fasting, praying, and communing with God. When he finally descended, the people were terrified because his face radiated the light of divine glory. Moses was an extraordinary leader, dying while leading his people to the promised land of Canaan. Even today, Jews recognize him as the lawgiver of Israel. However, despite all his blessings, Moses was denied entry into the promised land. You might wonder why. In Deuteronomy 32, God explains the reason. "This is because both of you broke faith with me in the presence of the Israelites at the Waters of Merbah Kadesh, in the desert of Zin, and because you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites. Therefore you will see the land only from a distance. You will not enter the land I am giving to the people of Israel." Deuteronomy 32:51-52. God kept his promise and showed Moses the promised land, but did not allow him to enter. The incident at the Waters of Merbah is recorded in Numbers 20. Near the end of their 40 years of wandering, the Israelites arrived at the desert of Zin, where there was no water, and the community rebelled against Moses and Aaron. They prostrated themselves before God, and he instructed Moses and Aaron to gather the assembly and speak to the rock, from which water would flow. Moses, irritated, proclaimed before the gathered crowd, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock?" Numbers 20:10. He then struck the rock twice with his staff, and water gushed out, as God had promised. However, God immediately declared that due to their lack of trust and for not honoring his holiness, Moses and Aaron would not lead the Israelites into the promised land. The punishment may seem severe, but upon closer examination of Moses' actions, several errors become evident. He disobeyed a direct command from God, who had instructed him to speak to the rock, but Moses struck it with his staff. Previously, in Exodus 17, God had instructed Moses to strike a rock to bring forth water, but the instructions varied here. God wanted Moses to trust him, especially after so many years of close relationship. Moses did not need to use force. His simple obedience to God and trust in the fulfillment of the divine promise were sufficient. Moreover, Moses attributed the act of bringing forth water to himself, asking the gathered people, "Must we bring you water out of this rock?" Numbers 20:10. Moses seemed to believe that he and Aaron deserved credit for the miracle, instead of attributing it to God. This public claim did not go unnoticed by God, who could not let such an act go unpunished, expecting the Israelites to understand divine holiness. The rock that provides water is symbolized in 1 Corinthians 10:4 as Christ. The rock was struck in Exodus 17, just as Christ was crucified once, Hebrews 7:27. Moses speaking to the rock in Numbers 20 could be interpreted as a representation of prayer. Jesus was struck once and continues to offer living water to those who pray in faith. However, when Moses struck the rock in anger, he compromised the biblical typology and essentially symbolized the crucifixion of Christ once more. The punishment imposed on Moses for his disobedience, pride, and misrepresentation of Christ's sacrifice was severe. He was prevented from entering the promised land. Surprisingly, we do not see Moses complaining about his punishment. Instead, he continued to lead the people faithfully, honoring God in his holiness. In his compassion, God invited Moses to Mount Nebo, where he revealed to his beloved prophet the promised land before his death. The account of Moses' death remains one of the great mysteries of the Bible. Although we know he died at 120 years old, his eyes did not weaken and his strength did not diminish. Moses was in his prime when he was called to his heavenly home. He ascended Mount Nebo, a 1,000-meter elevation, facing the adversities of old age with determination. Moses departed according to the word of the Lord, alone but in peace. His tomb was located in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but it remains unknown to this day. Moses is unique in the Bible, as he was personally buried by God. This divine act of hiding his tomb prevented it from becoming a site of worship, preserving the mystery surrounding his body that has never been found.